of Education.
Tracy Martin.
Order, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. It'll be no surprise to anybody in this House that New Zealand First stands to oppose this bill. And I'll tell you what is interesting, I'll tell you what is surprising is the fact that it's obvious that the government members have no intention of taking a call. So I think that should be noted by the New Zealand public, that the government members have no intention of interacting with the opposition around dialogue, justifying the steps they are taking in this piece of legislation in any way, shape or form. One might call it ignorance, another might call it arrogance, but that's something that should be noted by the New Zealand public, all the parents out there, the children that are going to schools, the secondary school students, the sector itself. Note that it would appear that the government members have absolutely no intention of taking a call on this bill to justify themselves. With regard to Part 1 of this bill, Mr. Chair, first of all, it does several things. So first of all, it enables the principal to manage more than one school. Now, what's interesting is that a principal can actually be, if there's a combined board, and you've probably heard this already, the principal can actually work across at least 2 schools, possibly 3 schools. I'm not aware that it can only be the combination of 2 school boards of trustees. I'm not aware that the legislation restricts it in any way to just 2 school boards of trustees. So, if you had a Cools with a cluster and the Cools decided to amalgamate their boards of trustees, it is possible already under the current legislation to actually, for the boards to agree that there could be one principal across all the boards. The Minister might like to correct me if I'm wrong about the current legislation. However, what this piece of legislation outlines is that they're changing the way that can be done so that, and in our view, what it does do is it turns principals from the leaders of education and learning inside secondary schools and recognition that they are the leaders of that learning into CEOs. So there is no way, and there was no way that the ministry was able to explain to us how the employment relationship would work in this instance. So it's not a combined board. Now we've got each individual boards, but we've got a principal who is contracted, and I think that's a really important word, contracted to several different boards. And that's what this change to the legislation allows. That turns the principal into a self-contracting CEO. That removes the accountability from a single board, it places it inside a contract, and then each board will have to have a contract with that CEO. Now, I've heard this before. I heard this in the digital literacy inquiry. I heard this 3 years ago when a gentleman came to present at the digital literacy inquiry and said there's no need for a principal to even be in the same country as the schools that they are managing. He said it's quite feasible with the digital age for them to be in Australia and be the CEO of several schools. Because that gentleman didn't get the relationship, and I'm not going to hesitate to say that that government doesn't get the relationship of the principal to the community, the link that the principal has between the teaching staff, the support staff, the students and the community. The vital link and the vital contribution that a principal inside that learning community makes. So that's the first thing that this bill does that we oppose. Changes to school opening hours. Let's be clear, boards of trustees have been able to change school opening hours for 27 years. For 27 years, as long as they consulted with their community, as long as they were open 2 hours either side of midday, and there's been a change of a single word around that midday, which I find very interesting. But schools boards of trustees have had the opportunity to change their opening hours with consultation with their community, and Matakana School would be a perfect example of that. What this bill does, however, is it inserts another group of people or another body inside the community that must be consulted, and that's now business. So what this does, it inserts a single entity inside the consultation bodies that must be talked to, and that is now business. And that's very interesting to us. There was no explanation why business needed to be consulted. They haven't had to be consulted for 27 years. I don't recall, no business has come to me, no school has gone to an extreme that has affected their employees and their ability to go to work. But now this government has inserted that business must be consulted by boards of trustees as part of that organisation. The next thing it does is it enables tertiary institutions to sponsor partnership schools. Mr Chair.
Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr Chair.
Kia ora.
Now, I think what was most interesting about this particular piece was that every university that came to present on the second part of this bill said, we're not interested. We're not interested in having a charter school. We don't want to know. We didn't ask for this. There was one tertiary provider that did, and that was Mr Stuart Middleton from the Manukau Institute of Technology. So one institution, one gentleman showed up to submit that this was a good idea. It's interesting. So where is this push that the government found that this was what was needed? And if, for example, this was a tertiary provider that was able to provide a charter school, something like what happens in Finland, where they are the trainers of teachers and parents know that it is a teaching school attached to a university, now that might be another topic. That might be innovation. That might be something that this Parliament could support, but it's not. All this is allowing a tertiary institution, and we know they're fighting for numbers at the moment. We know that their finances are under the gun because population-wise, the number of students that they've got going to tertiary institutions is dropping. They need another funding stream, and Mr Seymour and the ACT Party have given them another funding stream. And not only will this government allow them to now stretch the number of students from 5-year-olds all the way to 100-year-olds or whatever inside their tertiary institution, the taxpayer is going to fund every piece of property. The taxpayer is now going to fund every piece of property that that tertiary institution who becomes a sponsor of a charter school creates to deliver what is inside this bill. So that's the other reason. Partnership schools, dual provision. Here you go. Boards of trustees could already do this now, but they won't. Boards of trustees could already allow charter schools to come inside and use their tertiary rooms, their technology rooms, but they won't. They won't for many reasons. Mr Seymour will tell you because the unions have somehow blackmailed all the elected officials of the boards of trustees. I can tell you that is untrue. As the chairman of a board of trustee, I haven't had one single member of any union come to me and actually say, we're going to walk out if you were going to discuss this. What it is, let's talk about this. The charter schools do not come under the discipline process of state schools. There is only one form of complaint for charter schools, and that is to the Ombudsman after a child has been removed from the school. And the reason why it's important, Mr Bennett, if you'd like to be educated, is if a mainstream school, I know it was a long shot, but you got to try. If a mainstream school opens up its technology rooms, which is what this dual provision is, Mr Chair, if they open up their technology rooms to charter school students, the discipline process of the state school does not apply to the students of the charter school. If the charter school student causes some form of damage or attacks or assaults, look, it happens. There is no facility for the Board of Trustees of the state school to implement their discipline process over that student. They're a student of another organisation, and that organisation does not have to follow the discipline process. There are reasons why state schools do not want charter school students in their technology rooms. The fact that the charter schools get the dollar to build the technology rooms and don't do it and then want to go and use the ones that the state schools have built is one of the other ones. The ECE services, there were changes made at Select Committee, and quite frankly, while we're not that thrilled with home-based and the coverage of home-based at the moment, the changes made were positive. With regard to Teach First NZ and the new category of teaching position, I have a supplementary order paper, and I doubt very much whether Mr Chair is going to extend my call 1 minute longer, but I can appreciate the fact that seeing as the government members aren't taking calls, I'm sure that the opposition is going to have lots of opportunity before part 1 is actually voted on to discuss why my supplementary order paper is in here to restrict Teach First NZ style apprentices, because that's what they are apprentices in front of our students, should be restricted to secondary schools only, which is how Teach First NZ has been operating under the current pilot. So I'll leave it there, Mr Chair, because I have no doubt that while you're a fair man, you're unlikely to give me another call, but I'm hoping that my opposition colleagues will stand. Maybe, just maybe, we'll get a member of the government to stand. Oh, it doesn't look like it, a signal from the other side there. But maybe, just maybe, at some stage, the government members might think that this is important enough to stand up. Mr Bennett, stand up and show people you haven't read this.
Go on, stand up and show the New Zealand public that you are sitting there merely to warm a seat, because you do not know what it is that you're voting on. Kia ora.